This is what wrestling is today. And if you think it's anything else, you're living in the past and you're basically living in a bunch of stereotypes. Things have changed, and they've changed dramatically. I guess my first memories of wrestling never really involve the TV. They involve me and my brothers pretending to be the Steiner Brothers or Legion of Doom, jumping off bunk beds, that kind of stuff. Playing with a few action figures, the giant rubber Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper. So it wasn't until later on, really just before entering high school, when a big summer we had nothing to do other than walk up to the local grocery store and rent every single video there for 99 cents. And we went through all the wrestling videos, and that sort of rekindled the spark, and that led into the Attitude Era. And when wrestling picked up, we were the youth that picked up on it. And this is before the internet was as prevalent, so you couldn't just find a school in your local town. So the only schools I knew about, you could go down to Mexico and become a luchador. That would be typical for somebody my size. Or you could go up to Calgary and go to the Hart Dungeon and have Stu Hart stretch you if you want to be a wrestler. And so I remember telling my parents, I said, listen, I'm gonna be a wrestler. I'm either going to Mexico or Canada, but I'm not staying here any longer. And they were like, whoa, chill out. You don't have to take anything that extreme. You don't have to run away from home. Why don't you look for something around here? The school where I originally trained was in Florissant, Missouri. It was a really cool environment to get started at, and really just to start toughening me up for this business was just walk in at 17 and just get the tar kicked out of you. The trick with wrestling is you have to be trained to be so tough. You have to be able to do things that a regular person would break their neck doing. You have to be able to do that 5 days a week on the regular. So it's not about, we're not special people. We weren't born with rubber necks. It was training and discipline until you've built the calluses, the ring calluses, to do things that would snap an average person's neck, and we just do it and shake it right off. You could chop meat till the cows came home and I wouldn't even turn red. I was made out of cement because we trained hard, we hit each other hard, and it got to the point where you take so many chops to the chest, your chest stops turning red. It's just day-to-day activity. And that's what separates the wrestlers from the fans. And then in Japan, you go out with the fans after the show, they take you out to dinner, and then they want to get chopped. And instantaneously, one chop from these Japanese wrestlers or from me will turn their chest not just red, but the blood vessels will burst and blood will come to the surface. And they'll be bleeding from one chop, the same one chop that doesn't turn our chests red. So it's just discipline and training. And I think that's sort of a lost art, because there's something about learning to fall and that collision between back and mat. Like when it hits, there's just two types of people. There's the people who feel that the first time, they can't catch their breath, they roll out of the ring and they never get back in. And then there's the people like me and like my student Karim, and when they hit the mat, we get back up and we're like, can we do it again? Can we fall again? Can I hit it harder? Can I do it faster? How can I do it better? But we would take these falls, and I remember your body just feels a certain way. It's like after finishing a workout, or what I imagine runners feel, like that runner's high. I mean, I was just 17 years old, and I remember I'm in my 88 Toyota Camry station wagon, the Silver Bullet. It was just a box that barely could accelerate. But I'm hitting that on-ramp onto 270 South, the windows down, Dobie Gray, Drift Away is playing on K-Hits 96 Classic Rock. And it was just this magical feeling that I was in wrestling. I knew I was like behind the curtain. I got to see what was going on behind it, and I felt like I was a part of it. And like getting onto that highway going home, I was in like a dream state. And that kind of euphoria, that's that feeling that I've been chasing ever since. And we get that after a big match, or a match that's like, that just feels so good when it's over. I got that from that moment in training. After getting the shit kicked out of me, I felt better than I had in my entire life, more free. And there's something about when you're a young man and you're 16 and you've got all this pent up energy and aggression, you don't know where to channel it, you don't know where to put it. But wrestling is the perfect place to put it, because it is about being crazy and hitting hard and smashing, but with precision and discipline and all those things that go into it. But you have a way to express that inner turmoil, all that madness that's going on. You're 16, you're looking around, the world's crazy. All the adults, nobody knows what they're talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. What the hell's going on? I just need to punch. You don't need to punch a wall anymore. You got somebody right here you can lay into, that mutually agreed upon combat where you're not trying to make anybody hurt the next day, but it'd be okay if they're hurting just a little bit. And for me to have an outlet like that, I mean, that was just that was like a steam valve release. Man, I mean, I hate to romanticize wrestling so much, but it really is a romantic thing for me. I had a tryout weekend, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Sunday was the day that Benoit didn't make the pay-per-view. Monday was supposed to be the day that Vince McMahon's limo blew up. And by Tuesday, I was almost too afraid to go back and finish my tryout. It was so mad. There was so much going on and everybody was so stressed out. It was I had a lot of apprehension. I didn't feel comfortable. I mean, I had just been wrestling I hardly even remembered English to communicate with people. I had just spent basically the majority of the last 2 years wrestling in Japan, as if it wasn't intimidating enough to be 160 pounds, 5'7", walking to the backstage of the WWE. It was that particular weekend. So it was very tough for me, but luckily, I know a lot of people think maybe I was one of the first guys that was a small guy to wrestle in WWE, but there were already guys there. Paul London and Jimmy Yang looked after me that weekend and helped calm me down and let me realize that, hey, this is wrestling. The show always goes on. There's always going to be a show, and you need to show up on Tuesday. It was very intimidating, and it was just a fear zone for me, without a doubt, because I was in over my head. I hadn't even watched WWE in 2 years because I've been living in Japan. So I hardly knew who anybody was. I got to work with guys before the show, and then afterwards, finally on Tuesday, I was able to get a hold of John Laurinaitis, who was in charge of talent relations at the time, and he just told me, "Oh, hey kid," I would do a John Laurinaitis impression, but I can't do it justice compared to everybody else. But he said to me in no unclear terms, "Hey kid, we like your stuff. You've got a great reputation. Everybody, you're kind of gave me you're one of the boys, sort of like you have a good reputation, but we don't hire guys your size, especially not now. If we ever decide to go with a cruiserweight division or reopen the lightweight guys again, we'll give you a call." 2 weeks later, Mike Bucci, Nova, calls me on the phone and says, "Hey, today's my last day, but I put a contract through for you, so you'll get it in the mail, sign it and send it back. Do you want to go to OVW in Louisville, Kentucky, or do you want to go to Atlanta for Deep South?" And I was just like, what? So completely blindsided, contract comes in the mail, and then I get to go to OVW Wrestling. Everyone had body dysmorphia. Everybody was tough on each other. You were never big enough, you were never strong enough, and your match was never good enough. And I mean, it was a place where you had to re-examine everything you did 10 times over with a fine-tooth comb, just so that people wouldn't torture you. I mean, coming in at a size disadvantage, I actually have found that it worked to my advantage and disadvantage. One, working gigantic guys, they weren't used to wrestling somebody like me, and a lot of my moves are what I would call two-player moves. It takes two guys to execute the move well. So I had to reinvent everything I did to make them one-player moves, to make it so that I can just take a Rana on a guy without him really being with me. And so I had to learn a new style. I had to teach some people how to work with me, but I took something that was essentially non-existent at OVW and introduced it and brought it out, and within 3 months I'm OVW heavyweight champion. This wasn't a wrestling accident. It wasn't a twist your ankle or tear a ligament. This was all 4 bones, all 5 toes, off to the side. When you go out and wrestle, it's life or death. So if you don't take it seriously, if you don't put pressure on people, if you don't force them to get to the part where they're going to crack, then how are we gonna go out there and do this right? So some of the bullying is not for the sake of bullying, it's for the sake of your own life. It's for the sake of the person you're gonna be in the ring with. If I'm training you and I let things go, then what if you just let somebody go right over your shoulder? It's more important than not hurting yourself is not hurting the other guy. That's the true secret of wrestling. The most poignant thing that I learned when I was at FCW in Tampa, Florida was when Bret Hart came in and sat us all down and talked to us about wrestling. And he said the thing he was most proud of in his career was not hurting anyone else. And that just resonated with me so strong because essentially the guys in Japan were saying that, but they weren't saying it in the same way. That's what we were just doing. We were always looking out for each other. There was never, like, if there was a guy who's flopping around in the ring and two other guys are about to collide, somehow the three bodies never touched each other on the fall down. But I would see this stuff on smaller independent shows where guys weren't as trained, where guys are landing on each other's, somebody's ankle's pointing straight up and some guy comes landing down on it like this. I had just been treated to working with the highest class, most professional wrestlers, and then I had to come back and kind of face people who hadn't had that same discipline. There's a big difference between discipline and bullying. Bullying definitely exists. And my first training school, I was bullied so hard, like it really gave me a complex. I had a few other instances. I mean, one night of getting bullied badly can affect you for the rest of your life. It doesn't even have to be a consistent thing. It could just be one day where you're in a fragile spot and whoever's in a position of power might just be having a bad day themselves and they just blow off a gasket on you. But instead of it just washing right off like Teflon, that one stuck to you, it gets in deep, and like that's why people have a problem with bullying. The bullies have to coexist with everybody else. I've told guys before, they're saying, oh, this guy doesn't want to do this guy doesn't want to work with me. I said, what are you gonna do? Go fight him. That's it, you have two choices. You fight him or you work together. And the bullies find that out the hard way. They either have to fight or work together. I didn't leave WWE. Essentially what happened is I had a motorcycle accident. Well, motorcycle, it was a scooter. I had a wreck on a scooter that destroyed my foot. My right foot is never gonna be the same. It has a nice deformation, the size of a golf ball, a nub on the top of my foot. You know, I was healed to go back to a desk job. I was cleared to walk around, but could I move like a ninja? Could I leapfrog, drop down, spin kick the shit out of somebody? No, I couldn't. So I told him, okay, we'll keep going to rehab. Okay, so you go through this torture 3 days a week, 4 days a week, plus the amount you do on your own at home. You're just squeezing your foot, you're moving your ankle, you're doing this, you're doing the alphabet, you're doing the band, you're standing on one leg. It's all painful for at least an hour every day. You just keep doing that. This wasn't a wrestling accident. It wasn't a twist your ankle or tear a ligament. This was all 4 bones, all 5 toes, off to the side. Everything, the bone was sticking out through my foot. I mean, I just remember taking my stupid shoe off and looking at my bones sticking through my foot and just thinking, oh, I fucked up. I fucked up. WrestleMania is in April. I'm ready for WrestleMania, and WWE was behind me. We were together before this accident. But then after the accident, it was essentially I just sort of grew apart. And if you haven't done anything for them lately, really, what have you done? I wasn't earning my paycheck because I couldn't. And even when WWE released me, I didn't just start wrestling the next day. It wasn't from not getting bookings. It was because I had no confidence in my ankle. Took a little time off, but Daddy needed to make some money. So started taping that ankle up real hard and wrestling. Now, you gotta think about it. Every time I win a match, I'm doing a shooting star press and my foot comes down like that onto the mat. I land like this on the guy, boom, but the tail whip affected my feet coming down like that. And that's like the top of my nub smacking into the mat every night. So I get better during the week and then I smash it up during the weekend, and I wake up every morning, my foot hurts. I have to consciously keep myself from limping just to take the pain away. I had to remember to engage up my backside. Like I kind of have to, every time I step, remember how to walk properly because it still doesn't function right. Now, when I'm wrestling, it's different. I don't have that hesitation or the fear of my ankle because I've been working on it for so long. I know exactly what to expect from it. But for wrestlers, we truly identify ourselves with our body. So when we're not in the best shape, we feel bad about ourselves. When something's hurt, that depression's exaggerated. And one of the things I've had to really work on is not defining myself by my physical abilities anymore and really counting on myself as being more than just a body. There being more to me than just the physical externalities that I have that I express when I wrestle. And I think because of this foot injury, it forced me to go deeper inside to see who I am. And I think that's the net result has been a different wrestler than I've ever been before, a different character, a different personality, and really a more genuine, true character coming out. In that time that I was hurt, I started to think less about my physical body, like concentrating less on, oh, was my biceps look good today? That kind of nonsense. I always had a body dysmorphia, feeling small, feeling not big enough, not strong enough, not good, that was always what I was doing. And then I realized, well, not only am I not this, I also don't know what's going on up here. I don't know who's driving the ship. I was just running on pure momentum. Going to Peru, it was essentially told to me that you get a chance to examine yourself from an outside perspective. You get to get a new look, and I really didn't know what to do. I just knew that I needed to do some work on myself, and this going to Peru was an opportunity for it. So I heard that Aubrey Marcus, Joe Rogan podcast. And I said, I want to go to that place that Aubrey Marcus went to. It turns out that these plant medicines, ayahuasca and wachuma, they can be used to take the microscope that we use to cut up a cell and look at it and see how the cell works. You can take that microscope, turn it inwards, and see how you work. Get deep into your subconscious, find the things that you're stuck on, that one bullying thing that stuck you. You can pull it out, and sometimes it will manifest physically in vomit, or sometimes it'll just get released with a deep breath. I mean, it's a physical healing of emotional things that you can get out of these ceremonies. I was able to do the therapy on myself with a group in a setting with a professional healer who's been doing this stuff for 20 plus years. And there was a lot of healing that went on, but it's a healing process. It's not a healed. The culture we live in is these are the acceptable drugs of choice. You get jacked up on caffeine, run around like a maniac, pre-workouts, get all jacked up on caffeine, beer for afterwards, calm you down, relax you. Well, I'll tell you, there is a big drug culture in professional wrestling. Red meat, caffeine, tobacco, sugar. I mean, this is the culture that we all grew up in. Alcohol is poison, and it is the most prevalent drug of choice in all of wrestling. It's a culturally indoctrinated thing from day one. I mean, people aren't really given a choice. You're not really given any option. The culture we live in is these are the acceptable drugs of choice. You get jacked up on caffeine, run around like a maniac, pre-workouts, get all jacked up on caffeine, beer for afterwards, calm you down, relax you. For me, I always get caught in the syntax or the words that we correlate to the word drug and how drug is referred to, because Tylenol is a drug and you can die from Tylenol. So is there a drug culture? Yeah, people love to drink and they like to have fun and it's nice, but there was never this monstrous drug culture where if guys came up with problems, they had a place to go. I was really fortunate to not have to see a lot of my friends suffer through a lot of that stuff. I mean, there's a lot of guys that hurt to this day because they've seen their friends fight through pain. And yeah, we fight through pain too, but lessons were learned from those guys that went down, from the guys that maybe abused painkillers and steroid, and the combinations that became lethal. The day I got into wrestling, it was almost expected that steroids and wrestling were correlated, that I would have to do steroids at some point in my career if I wanted to make it. Essentially, the head creator of the pro wrestling industry preferred that look. But, you know, not all music goes through the same producer, not all music has to be played on the same radio station. And so we've proven that variety is possible. This is what a pro wrestler is today. This is what I learned from Brian Kendrick. We are backstage at WWE, we're walking back in. Typical, of course we don't have credentials, we wrestle, you know, you just walk backstage. But this time, one of the few times, the security guard said, "Hey guys, what are you doing?" So he said, "We're wrestlers, we're going in." I was like, "You guys don't look big enough to be wrestlers." Not too condescending, but not very friendly. But also not something Kendrick and I haven't heard 8,500 times throughout our whole career. And Brian looks at him and says, "This is what a wrestler looks like. I am a wrestler, this is what wrestlers look like today." And since that moment, that's what I've been saying. You're too big to be a wrestler? No, look at me. This is what wrestlers look like. This is what we look like, and this is what we do. For anyone to say, oh, wrestlers are big or this, or any kind of to fall back into stereotypes, I thought we were kind of beyond that as a culture, as a society, as a world, that we would fall back into all these nonsense stereotypes. But still people think about wrestling as Hulkamania, and I'm trying to change that. So yes, it is that, but it's also Stone Cold, and it's also The Rock, and it's also Matt Sydal. So when somebody says, what's a wrestler look like? This is my 8x10. This is me. This is what wrestling is today. And if you think it's anything else, you're living in the past, and you're basically living in a bunch of stereotypes, and you may as well reevaluate the rest of your assumptions in life, because things have changed, and they've changed dramatically. And wrestling isn't just one thing, it's an entire art form. I could show you a frame, a blank frame, and say that's art, and tell you, oh, it's a cloud, but it's just very zoomed in. And then I could show you some cool Picasso or I imagine there's artists who can draw really well, who aren't me, which I have no artistic ability. But what I'm saying is all that's art. The same way jazz is music, rap's music, and so is classical music, bluegrass, country. The variety is what makes things special. If all wrestling was the stereotype, why would you pay to see that? It wouldn't be what intrigue could possibly occur. The fact that I am opposite of the generic stereotype is to my benefit, because I can help shatter that mold. And if people are used to the stereotype, when they see me in the ring, they see something new, novel, and impossible to ignore.